Chapter 1. The Wrong Letter. Elmer Grant was 73 years old. He lived in a quiet town called Brighton in Oregon, USA. His house was small, old, and full of memories. He had built it himself many years ago. Every wall had a story. Every corner had a moment from his past. Elmer used to work as a postmaster. He loved his job. He delivered letters, sorted mail, and met people every day. The town knew him. People smiled when they saw him walk with his brown bag. He was kind. He was simple. He was helpful. But times changed. He retired. The town grew. New people came. Elmer stayed behind. His wife passed away 6 years ago. His children moved far away. Now, he lived alone. His days were slow. His nights were silent. He still waited. For letters, for phone calls, for old memories to return. He didn't need much, just a voice, a visit, or a small reason to smile. He missed the old times. He missed being needed. Elmer Grant sat by the front door, the same place he sat every morning. He didn't check his phone. He didn't open the TV. He just waited. For what? Even he didn't know. Maybe a knock, maybe a sound, or maybe just silence like most days. He was 73 now. Life had become slower. The house was too quiet. His wife had passed away 6 years ago. His son and daughter called sometimes, but not often. They lived far. He didn't complain. He just missed them. That morning, the mailman stopped in front of his house. Elmer opened the door. "Good morning," he said. The mailman nodded and handed him a few letters. Elmer smiled politely and went back inside. He looked at the envelopes, bills, a magazine, and then one letter that made him pause. The name on it was not his. It said, "To Emily Rose, 39 Willow Street." That was his address. But who was Emily Rose? Elmer turned the envelope in his hands. No return name, only a faded stamp. It looked old, almost yellow. The letter didn't look new. The corners were soft. It had probably been lost in the system for a long time. Still, something about the name pulled at his heart. Emily Rose. He had never heard that name before. At least he didn't think so. He sat in his chair and looked at the letter for a long time. Should he open it? It wasn't his, but it came to his house. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it belonged to someone who lived here before him. But Elmer had lived in this house for more than 40 years. He built it himself with his own hands. He knew every wall, every sound, every memory. There was no Emily Rose. His hands slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a single page, handwritten, in blue ink. The writing was soft, like someone took time to write it. It started with, "Dear Emily, I don't know if you will ever read this, but I had to write it anyway." Elmer stopped. Something inside him moved. He read more. "I still think of that day. I still remember your laugh. They say time heals everything, but it hasn't healed me." He looked at the letter again. It was a love letter, a sad one, full of feelings. Elmer read each line. Some parts felt strange. Some parts felt familiar, too familiar. like the words were not just for Emily, but for him too. When he finished reading, he folded the letter slowly. He looked out the window. For a moment, he felt like someone was standing there, watching him. But there was no one. Only silence. He didn't know why, but his chest felt heavy. He had not cried in years, but now he felt close to it. The name, the letter, the feelings. All of it touched a place in him he had kept locked for a long time. He placed the letter on the table. He would not throw it. He would not return it. He would keep it, at least for now. Maybe he would find out who Emily Rose was. Or maybe he wouldn't. But deep down, he felt the letter had come for a reason. Later that day, he took a walk near the park. A young woman was sitting alone on a bench. She looked up and smiled at him. For a moment, his heart skipped. That smile, he had seen it before. But where? Elmer walked past slowly. His steps were slow, but his mind was full of questions. He did not believe in signs. But this day felt different. Was this just a lost letter? Or the start of something he had forgotten? Chapter 2. A Face from the Past. Elmer could not sleep that night. He sat in his chair, the letter still on the table beside him. His eyes stayed open. His mind stayed busy. Emily Rose. That name, that handwriting, that voice in the letter. It all felt too close, too deep. He knew the letter was not meant for him, but it had reached him for some reason. He felt it. He just didn't know why yet. The next morning, he walked slower than usual. His legs felt weak, but his heart felt heavier. He needed air, not the kind outside, the kind that clears the inside of your chest, that air you feel when something is stuck in your memory. He walked back to the park, the same park where he had seen that girl the day before. He did not expect to see her again, but she was there, same bench, same quiet face, same soft smile. She looked up and said, "Good morning." Elmer nodded. "Good morning." "You live nearby?" she asked. He pointed across the road. "That house with the brown gate. Been there a long time." She smiled again. "I just moved here last month. Sophie, by the way." "Elmer," he replied. "Nice to meet you." Sophie looked young, maybe in her late 20s, but there was something about her, something calm, something familiar. Her eyes, her smile, even the way she tilted her head while talking. Elmer felt like he had seen her before, but he hadn't. Or had he? They sat in silence for a moment. "Do you come to the park often?" she asked. "Used to, long time ago. Now, sometimes." She nodded. "It's peaceful. I like places that feel old." That line touched Elmer. Old places. That's what he had become too. "What do you do, Sophie?" he asked. "I work at the town library," she said. "Just started last week. I love books. And quiet." Elmer smiled. His wife used to say the same. She loved books too. After a few minutes, Sophie stood up. "It was nice talking to you. Maybe I'll see you again." "I'm usually around," he said softly. She walked away. Elmer kept watching her until she turned the corner. Something in him felt warm. Something also felt strange. Back at home, Elmer opened a drawer. Inside was an old album. He hadn't opened it in years. The dust on it made that clear. He slowly flipped the pages. Pictures of his wife, his children, family picnics, friends. Then he stopped. One photo caught his eyes. It was a black and white photo. A young woman standing in front of a library. Her smile, her eyes, her head tilt. It looked just like Sophie, but the photo was over 40 years old. He turned the photo around. A name was written in his wife's handwriting. Emily Rose, 1981. Elmer froze. The name, the face, the letter. He felt a chill, not on his skin, in his memory. How could Sophie look like someone from 40 years ago? Why did the letter come now? Who was Emily Rose, really? He held the photo in one hand and the letter in the other. The questions had just begun. Chapter 3. Old Pictures, Old Feelings. Elmer sat still, holding the photo of Emily Rose in one hand and the letter in the other. The room around him felt smaller, quieter, as if even the walls were waiting for answers. The more he stared at the photo, the more it confused him. It wasn't just the smile, it was everything. The same eyes, the same calm face, the same softness. Sophie looked almost exactly like Emily. But how was that possible? Emily Rose had lived decades ago. He didn't know her well. She was a friend of his wife. She had visited them a few times. That was all. After a while, they lost touch. And yet, here was Sophie, with the same face, same look, and somehow the same effect on his heart. Elmer opened more drawers. He took out old letters, photos, notebooks. His fingers moved slowly. Some papers had stains from coffee. Some pages had faded. He wasn't looking for anything specific, just hoping to feel closer to the truth. Then he found something. It was an old card, a birthday card. It said, "Happy birthday, Emily. Love always, from Margaret." Margaret was Elmer's late wife, so she had written to Emily. That meant the two were closer than Elmer had remembered, maybe even very close. He sat back and closed his eyes. He tried to bring back the image of Emily, her voice, her laugh. He remembered one afternoon. Emily had come over. They had tea together, all three of them. She had brought a book as a gift for Margaret. Elmer had found her quiet, polite, and full of deep thoughts. But back then, she was just a friend of his wife. Nothing more. Suddenly, Elmer stood up and walked back to the park. Maybe Sophie would be there again. He didn't know what he would say. He just wanted to see her face again. But when he reached the bench, it was empty. No one. Just a light breeze and the sound of leaves. He waited for a while, then slowly walked to the library. Maybe she was working. When he entered, the front desk was empty. A few people sat quietly reading. The library was calm, just like Sophie had said she liked it. He walked around and finally saw her. She was standing near the history section, placing books back on the shelf. "Sophie," he said softly. She turned, smiled. "Mr. Elmer, you came by?" I had a question," he said, unsure of what to ask. "Sure," she said kindly. "Have you ever heard of the name Emily Rose?" he asked, carefully watching her face. She paused for a moment, then said, "No." "Should I?" Elmer forced a smile. "Just someone I used to know." She nodded. "Pretty name, though." He watched her carefully. Either she truly didn't know, or she was hiding something. He couldn't tell. "Would you like some tea?" Sophie asked suddenly. "We have a small kitchen for staff. I can bring 2 cups outside. It's a nice day." Elmer nodded. "Yes, that would be nice." They sat outside on a wooden bench near the building. She handed him the cup. He held it tightly. Her hands were steady. Her smile was warm. Her eyes calm. They talked about small things, books, towns, old buildings. But Elmer's mind was far. He couldn't stop thinking. Why did Sophie look like Emily? Was she related? A granddaughter, maybe? Or was this just a strange coincidence? He took out the old photo and showed it to her. "Do you see the woman in this picture?" he asked. Sophie looked. Her smile faded a little. "She looks like me," she whispered. "Yes," Elmer said. "Her name was Emily Rose." Sophie looked again, then gave the photo back. "Strange," she said. "I don't know her, but this feels familiar." Elmer nodded. His heart beat faster. He could feel the mystery getting deeper. Maybe Sophie really didn't know. Or maybe her past was hidden even from herself. That night, Elmer sat in his living room with all the lights off. Only a small lamp beside him glowed faintly. He laid the letter, the photo, and the card on the table. He looked at each one again and again. He wanted them to speak, to tell him what he could not understand. But they remained silent, just like the room. Suddenly, he remembered something. A drawer in the attic. Margaret used to keep her private things there. Letters, photos, little memories from the past. Elmer had not touched it since she died. He walked up the narrow stairs, slowly, carefully. The attic smelled of time. Dust floated in the air. He opened the old drawer and found a small wooden box. Inside were several envelopes. Some had Margaret's name on them. Some were blank. But one had Emily written on it. Just that. Elmer opened it. It was a note. From Margaret. It read, "If anything ever happens to me, and you meet someone who reminds you of Emily, don't ignore it. Life sometimes gives us second chances in strange ways." Elmer's hands shook. He sat down on the attic floor. That one line from Margaret opened a flood of thoughts. Did she know something? Did Margaret know this might happen? The next day, Elmer went back to the library. Sophie wasn't there. He asked a staff member. They said she hadn't come in. He waited for an hour, but she never showed. On his way back, he passed by an old bookstore. A small display outside showed used books and journals. One of them caught his eye. It had a name written inside, Emily R. The shopkeeper said someone dropped it off a week ago. He didn't know who. Elmer bought it, took it home, opened it. The pages were filled with handwritten notes, quotes, thoughts, even short poems. And in one corner there was a line. Sometimes the heart remembers what the mind forgets. Elmer sat back, heart pounding. Was Sophie connected to all of this? Was it all just strange timing? Or was the past slowly returning in pieces, asking to be understood? Could Sophie be a part of a story that never truly ended? Chapter 4. Strange Questions. 2 days passed, and Sophie didn't return to the library. Elmer walked there again and again, but every time the answer was the same. "She's not here today," the staff would say. Each time, Elmer felt a little more lost. The letter, the photo, the note from Margaret, the book with Emily's name, it was all pointing to something. But Sophie was missing, and that made everything feel stuck. He sat at his window and stared at the street. He watched the mailman, the kids riding bikes, the cars passing by. But he waited for one person only, Sophie. He wondered if she was real, if she was ever really there. Maybe she was just a dream from a tired mind, or maybe she had left because she felt something too. That evening, the doorbell rang. Elmer opened the door slowly. It was Sophie. She looked a little pale, like she hadn't slept well, but she smiled gently. "Hi, Mr. Elmer. I'm sorry I didn't come earlier." Elmer stepped aside. "Come in, Sophie." She walked in, looked around, and sat on the old couch. Elmer brought 2 cups of tea. He didn't ask her where she had been. Not yet. They sat quietly for a while. Then Sophie said, "Something strange happened." Elmer looked at her. "Tell me." "I had a dream," she whispered. "I was in a house I had never seen before, but it felt like home. There was a woman with dark hair. She hugged me and called me her daughter. And there was a man sitting near the fireplace. He looked a lot like you." Elmer's hands tightened around the cup. Sophie continued. "When I woke up, I felt sad, like I had lost something, or someone. I don't even know why I'm telling you this." Elmer looked at her for a long time. Then he stood up, walked to the drawer, and brought out the photo. The one of Emily Rose. He gave it to her. Sophie looked at it. She didn't speak for a long moment. "That woman," she said slowly. "She's the one from my dream." Elmer sat back down. Her name was Emily Rose. She was close to my wife. And now I don't know who you are, Sophie. But I feel like you're part of something I never finished. Sophie looked confused. "Do you think we're connected?" "I don't know," Elmer said. "But the letter, the picture, the book, even your dream, it's all too much to ignore." She looked down at the floor. "I was adopted," she said quietly. "I never knew my real parents. I never asked. I didn't want to know. But now I'm not so sure." Elmer nodded slowly. "Maybe this is your story too. Maybe we're both part of something bigger." That night, Sophie didn't leave. Elmer told her stories from the past, about Margaret, about the town, about small things that once mattered. Sophie listened like every word was a thread she was trying to follow. When she left, she promised to come again the next day. Elmer watched her walk away, but something inside him knew. They were moving closer to something. A truth. A name. A memory. The next morning, Elmer went back to the attic. He searched through more boxes. He found a small notebook. It was Margaret's. Inside, he saw more notes, mostly small things, recipes, to-do lists. But on one page, she had written, Emily wanted to keep the baby, but her family didn't allow it. She cried for days. Elmer felt the ground shift beneath him. A baby? Emily had a child? And no one told him? He flipped more pages. Another line said, I promised her I'd protect her secret. Elmer sat on the attic floor for hours. He didn't move. His hands shook. His eyes stayed on the words. It was real. Emily had a child, and Margaret knew. That afternoon, Sophie returned. Elmer gave her the notebook. She read the lines slowly, her eyes filled with tears. My birthday is in June, she said. So was hers. Elmer looked at her. He didn't need to say anything. It was in the air, in the silence, in the tears. Sophie said, Do you think she was my mother? Elmer nodded. Yes, I believe so. Sophie stood up and walked to the window. She looked out but saw nothing. Only memories she never lived. Only faces she never met. But her heart felt full and empty at the same time. Elmer walked up beside her. I think Margaret left this path for us to walk together. Sophie looked at him. But why you? He smiled faintly. Maybe I was meant to carry the truth. Maybe I was meant to find you. The room felt heavy, but peaceful. Like something lost was slowly coming home. Was this the end of the mystery? Or was there still one more truth hiding in the past? Chapter 5. The Closed Room. The next morning, Elmer woke up earlier than usual. The sky outside was still gray, and the house felt colder than normal. But something inside him was warm. Like a light had been turned on after a long time. Last night had changed everything. Sophie knew the name Emily. She knew the pain of not knowing her past. And now they had both seen Margaret's words hidden for decades in a forgotten notebook. Elmer sat by the table, the photo, the letter, and the notebook all spread before him. His hands moved slowly across the pages as if touching the past. He whispered Margaret's name under his breath and closed his eyes. You were trying to tell me something, he said softly, and I think I'm ready to listen now. A memory came to him, something he hadn't thought about in years. There was a room in the house on the second floor at the end of the hallway. It had always been locked. Margaret used to keep it closed. She told Elmer it was for storage. Old things. Nothing important. But she had the key and she never let him clean it or go inside. After her death, Elmer never touched that door. Maybe out of respect, maybe out of fear. He stood up slowly and walked toward the stairs. His feet felt heavy, like they knew something waited above. At the end of the hallway stood the brown door. Dust had settled along its edges. The key still hung beside it, on a small nail in the wall. Elmer hadn't looked at it in years. He took the key, placed it in the lock, and turned. The door creaked open. The room was quiet. Dark. The curtains were drawn. He reached in and opened them, letting in a soft light. Inside were boxes, shelves, and a wooden desk. Everything smelled of time. He walked in slowly, his eyes moving from one thing to another. On the desk sat a small wooden box. Inside it were papers, photos, and a folded cloth. Elmer opened the papers first. They were hospital documents. He read the name. Emily Rose. Date: June 17th, 1996. There was a line that stopped his breath. Child delivered, no family present. His heart beat louder. He looked further and saw another note. This one had Margaret's handwriting. She asked me to be there. Emily had no one. I held her hand as Sophie was born. Elmer sat down on the floor. The cloth inside the box was a baby blanket, pale pink with the initials SR stitched in one corner. Sophie Rose. It was all true. Sophie was Emily's daughter. Margaret had been there when she was born. Emily must have left her baby behind, maybe because she had no support. Maybe Margaret helped arrange the adoption. Maybe Margaret kept the truth hidden to protect Sophie, or perhaps to protect Emily's wish. Elmer felt a mix of emotions: sadness, anger, relief, but above all, a deep connection to the girl he had only recently met. He stood up and took the box downstairs. That afternoon, Sophie came by again. She looked tired, but calm. When Elmer opened the door, she smiled without speaking. They both knew this visit was different. He placed the box on the table. "I went into the room," he said quietly. Sophie looked at the box. Her eyes fell on the pink cloth. She touched it gently. "This was mine." Elmer nodded. "Yes. And this," he said, handing her the paper, "is the day you were born." Sophie read it with shaking hands. When she finished, she sat down and whispered, "So it's true. I really am her daughter." "You are," Elmer said. "And Margaret, she was there with your mother. She kept all of this safe. She was waiting for the right time to pass it on." Sophie looked up at him. "But why didn't she tell me? Or you?" Elmer shook his head. "I think she wanted to protect your mother's choice. Maybe she thought the world would never understand. Maybe she was waiting for you to come back in some way." Tears rolled down Sophie's cheeks. She wasn't crying from pain. It was something else, something softer, like the quiet sadness of finally knowing who you are. Elmer sat beside her. "Sophie, you are not just someone from the past. You're part of this house, this family, this heart." She leaned on his shoulder. "Do you think she loved me?" Elmer closed his eyes. "I believe she loved you more than anything. She just didn't know how to keep you. But she gave you something stronger, a connection. And now, that connection brought you here." They sat in silence. Time slowed down. The house didn't feel cold anymore. It felt full again, as if Margaret and Emily were both still there, smiling from a place beyond time. As the sun went down, Sophie looked up. "I want to know more about her, about you, about everything." Elmer smiled. "Then we'll open every box, every page, together." Chapter 6. A Voice from the Past. The next morning, the house felt different. Elmer could feel it in the way the light came through the windows. It wasn't brighter, it wasn't warmer, but it felt alive. like someone had finally come home. Sophie stayed over for breakfast. Elmer made toast and eggs. It had been years since he had cooked for someone else. He watched her eat, smiled at how carefully she held the pink blanket on her lap. She hadn't let go of it since yesterday. After breakfast, Sophie looked around the living room. Her eyes paused on every photo, every object. "I feel like I belong here," she said softly. "You do," Elmer replied. "This house always had space. It just needed the right person to walk in." They sat by the table again. Elmer brought more things from the upstairs room, letters, an old diary, and a small tape recorder. Sophie turned it over in her hand. "What's this?" she asked. "Margaret used it sometimes," Elmer said. "She would record her thoughts. I never listened to these." There were 3 old cassette tapes. Sophie placed one inside and pressed play. At first, there was just a soft crackle. Then Margaret's voice filled the room. Software calm, full of memory. "If someone finds this, it means my time has passed. But my heart still lives in this house, in the walls, in the floor, and maybe in the child I once held in my arms." Sophie gasped and covered her mouth. Elmer sat frozen. Margaret's voice continued. "Emily was brave. She gave life to a girl she couldn't keep. She cried in my arms. I promised her I would take care of her baby if anything ever happened. And when Emily disappeared, I kept that promise. I made sure her daughter went to a family that would raise her with love." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. Elmer placed a hand on her shoulder. Margaret's voice was still there, strong yet gentle. "I wanted to tell you, Elmer, many times, but something always stopped me. I thought maybe one day the child would return. Maybe not by name, but by heart. If you ever meet her, don't send her away. She belongs to us more than she knows." The tape stopped. Silence. Sophie was crying now, not from pain, but from something deeper. Something like being found after years of feeling lost. Elmer handed her a handkerchief. She smiled between her tears. "She kept her word," Sophie whispered. "And now I found her again. In you." Elmer nodded. "You were never truly gone, just waiting to return." They spent the afternoon going through Margaret's diary. One page had a drawing of a baby's hand. Below it, she had written, "She held my finger and changed my world." Elmer read more aloud. Every word painted a picture of love, pain, hope, and quiet strength. Sophie listened like she was hearing her mother's voice for the first time. Later that evening, they walked to the old bookstore where Elmer had found the journal with Emily R.'s name. They asked the man at the counter if he had seen the person who brought it. "Tall man, gray coat, quiet," the man said. "Didn't say much. Left in a hurry." Sophie looked at Elmer. Could it be someone from Emily's past? "Or someone who knows her story," Elmer replied. They walked back slowly. The sun was low. The town looked older, but softer. Every step felt like it was carrying both of them back in time and forward at the same time. That night, Sophie stayed in the guest room. Elmer sat near the window and looked at the sky. He whispered to Margaret, She came back, just like you said. The next morning, a letter arrived. No sender, no return address, just one name written on the front: Sophie. Elmer handed it to her. She opened it slowly. Inside were just a few lines. If you want to know the rest of the story, come to Willow Tree Rest Home, room 27. Ask for Daniel. Sophie looked at Elmer, confused. Do you know a Daniel? She asked. Elmer shook his head. Number. But maybe Emily did. Who is Daniel, and what truth still hides behind that name? Chapter 7. The Man in Room 27. The next morning, Elmer and Sophie stood outside Willow Tree Rest Home. It was a quiet place with large trees, red bricks, and a slow peace in the air. Sophie held the letter in her hand. Her fingers shook slightly. Elmer noticed, but he said nothing. He simply stood beside her, strong and steady, like a tree she could lean on. They walked to the front desk. A kind nurse looked up. Can I help you? We're looking for a man named Daniel, Elmer said. Room 27. The nurse checked the list. Daniel West. He's been here a few years, doesn't talk much. But yes, he's in room 27. You may go in, just knock first. Sophie and Elmer walked down the hallway. Each step echoed softly. Sophie's heart beat faster with every door they passed. Finally, they stopped in front of room 27. Sophie raised her hand and knocked gently. A voice from inside said, Come in. Elmer opened the door. Inside, an old man sat by the window. His hair was white. His eyes looked far away. But when he saw Sophie, something changed in his face. A quiet shock. A memory. You came, he said slowly. Sophie stepped in. Are you Daniel? Yes. And you must be Sophie. Elmer and Sophie sat down. Daniel looked at her with watery eyes. You look just like her, he whispered. Like who? Sophie asked, though she already knew. Emily, he said. Your mother. Sophie held her breath. Daniel reached into the drawer and took out an old envelope. He handed it to her. She asked me to give this to you, but only if you ever came looking. Sophie opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a letter, Emily's handwriting, her words. My dearest daughter, if you're reading this, it means you have found your way back. I hope it was not too painful. I hope someone was kind to you. I hope you found someone who reminded you what love feels like. I wanted you more than anything, but I was scared. The world didn't give me many choices. I gave you to people I trusted, and I asked Margaret to keep watch. She promised me she would, and I knew she would keep her word. I thought of you every birthday, every June. I dreamed of your smile. I prayed that you were happy. I never stopped loving you. You were never unwanted, only unready. Forgive me if you can. And know this, your life is your own now, but your heart carries my love forever. Mom, Emily. Sophie's hands trembled. Her eyes overflowed. Elmer sat beside her, silent, but with tears in his own eyes. Daniel looked at them. Emily was my sister. I wasn't brave. I didn't fight enough to help her. I let her handle it alone. I always regretted that. Sophie looked up. Why now? Why the letter? I heard from Margaret before she passed, Daniel said. She told me you might return one day. She gave me your name. She told me to wait. I've waited for years. Sophie nodded slowly. I'm glad you did. They spent the next hour talking. Daniel shared stories about Emily, her favorite songs, how she laughed when it rained, how she always carried a small notebook in her purse to write down dreams. Sophie listened to every word like a thirsty heart. Every detail was a gift. Every memory a piece of her missing puzzle. Before they left, Daniel held her hand. Tell her, he said to Elmer. Tell Margaret, if you ever talk to her in your heart, that I'm sorry and that I'm thankful. Elmer nodded. She already knows. Outside, the air felt lighter. Sophie looked up at the sky. I feel full, she said, like all the empty places inside me have been filled. Elmer smiled. Then let's take everything home. That night, Sophie placed the letter from Emily beside her bed. She touched it once more before closing her eyes. Elmer stood at the doorway, watching her with the quiet joy of a man who finally found what he didn't know he was looking for. He whispered to the air, Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Emily. She's safe now. Chapter 8. The Daughter Who Came Home. The sun rose gently over Brighton as Elmer stood on the porch. The morning was calm, and yet something inside him felt full. Not heavy, not sad, just full. Like a long journey was coming to its quiet end. Behind him, the house felt warm again, lived in, alive. Inside, Sophie was setting the table. 2 cups, 2 plates. 2 lives now connected by truth. She had stayed ever since they came back from meeting Daniel. She didn't ask if she could stay longer. Elmer never asked when she would leave. They both knew she belonged here now. After breakfast, Elmer brought out a small wooden box Margaret had once kept near the fireplace. He opened it slowly and took out the last of the letters. These were not about Emily or Sophie. These were Margaret's final words to him. He read them aloud to Sophie. Elmer, if you find this letter, it means you've walked through the memories I tried to keep safe. Thank you. Thank you for opening the room, for facing the past, for being the kind of man who listens with his heart, not just his ears. I kept Emily's secret because she asked me to. But I hoped one day that secret would become a bridge, not a wall. And now it has. I know you feel alone sometimes. I know the quiet is loud. But you are not alone anymore. She will come. Maybe not as a daughter, maybe not by name. But when she smiles, you'll know. When she touches your hand, you'll feel it. Love never forgets the way home. Always yours, Margaret. Elmer folded the letter gently. He looked at Sophie, who had tears in her eyes again. You've both given me more than answers, she said. You've given me back pieces of myself I didn't know were missing. They spent the day cleaning the attic together. Elmer told her stories about Margaret, how she laughed when he burned toast, how she used to dance in the kitchen when no one was watching. Sophie laughed with him and sometimes cried too, but this time the tears didn't hurt. They healed. That evening, they walked to the park. The same place where Elmer had first seen her, sitting on a bench with that quiet smile. They sat again in the same spot. The air was soft. The trees whispered gently. "Do you believe in second chances?" Sophie asked. Elmer smiled. "I believe in second homes, second hearts, and in people who come back when you least expect it." Sophie took his hand. "Then maybe I'm both your second chance and your first family again." He looked at her, eyes moist, heart open. "Yes, you are." Later that night, Sophie found one last note hidden behind an old photo frame. It was from Emily, left behind long ago. It read, "To the one who finds this, know that love never ends. Even if time hides it, even if pain delays it, it waits. And when it returns, it comes home with a smile." Sophie placed that note beside Margaret's the pink baby cloth and her mother's letter. Together, in one box, one family, one story. As days passed, people in town began to notice Sophie more. Some asked if she was Elmer's granddaughter. Others just smiled and nodded. Elmer never corrected them. He simply said, "She's family." On Sophie's next birthday, Elmer baked a small cake. He lit one candle. As she closed her eyes to make a wish, she said, "I already got mine." Elmer didn't ask what it was. He already knew. The house on Willow Street no longer felt empty. It sang again, through laughter, through quiet dinners, through shared memories and new ones being made. Elmer often stood by the window, holding Margaret's letter in one hand and Sophie's laughter in his ears. He no longer waited for mail. He no longer waited for phone calls. He had all he needed under one roof. The past had not vanished, but it had healed.